The timid teenager who always endured humiliation and silence had already died in that rain-soaked alley last night. What remained now inside my gaze was only coldness and sharpness impossible to shake. After that, I went straight to Jiang City First Hospital. At the cashier window late at night, the duty nurse had almost fallen asleep, but the moment I slammed the unregistered black card against the glass, she jumped in shock. She couldn't even finish showing the annoyed expression she originally had. I looked directly at her and spoke only a single sentence. ICU patient Linxia. Use the most effective medicine immediately. Right now. There's 330,000 on the card. If it's not enough, I'll find more. My voice was hoarse, but there wasn't even the slightest trace of begging in it anymore. The nurse froze for a moment before lowering her head to look at the anonymous black card representing an enormous amount of money. Then she looked back at me, at my cheap, worn-out student uniform, and disbelief instantly filled her eyes. A teenage boy dressed like someone from a poor family had casually brought out more than 300,000 star coins. The difference between my appearance and the amount of money was so absurd that she didn't even know how to react. But one thing couldn't lie. The balance on that black card was real. Because of that, the nurse immediately changed her attitude. She quickly stood up, contacted the doctors, and arranged the highest level of treatment process available in the hospital. Half an hour later, the newest gene repair serum was slowly injected into Linxia's body. Only after I saw a little color finally returning to her paper-pale face did the tension inside my chest loosen slightly. The room was quiet as I sat beside her bed, gently fixing the hair dampened by sweat on her forehead. My movements were careful and soft, and only at moments like this did the terrifying coldness and killing intent inside my eyes slowly fade away, replaced by a warmth that almost felt unfamiliar. Linxia was my only anchor in this freezing world. She was also my greatest weakness. Even though her body was weak from illness, her senses remained sharp. Her eyelashes trembled lightly before she slowly opened her eyes. She reached out and held my hand before quietly whispering, "Big brother, did you do something dangerous?" She could smell the faint scent of rust and blood I couldn't completely wash away. She could also feel the coldness in my body that was completely different from before. My heart tightened instantly. Even so, I still forced out a gentle smile. Just like always, I rubbed her head softly and lied to her calmly. "No, little sis, Big brother just sold the school slot to some rich family's kid. I only got a little money so I could pay for your treatment first." The moment she heard that, sadness immediately filled her eyes. She knew better than anyone how important that school slot was to me, and how many years I had struggled for it. Her eyes gradually turned red as she whispered guiltily, "I'm only becoming a burden to you." But I simply pinched her nose lightly like I was comforting a child and smiled at her. "It's just some useless school slot. If it's gone, then it's gone. Even without studying, your big brother will still become the strongest person someday. So stop thinking about unnecessary things and focus on getting better. Once you recover, I'll take you to eat tangulu from the shop in the southern district." After Linxia finally fell asleep again, I quietly fixed her blanket and stared at her for a very long time. But the moment I stepped outside the hospital room, every trace of gentleness on my face completely vanished. What replaced it was a killing intent colder than the darkness of the night itself. "Josie, you stole my future. You humiliated my sister. It's time for you to pay for trampling on my dignity." The next morning, sunlight rose over the gates of Jiangcheng First High School. But when those rays landed on me, it felt as though even the warmth was blocked by the invisible coldness surrounding my body. Just like every day over the past 3 years, I entered the school carrying my old worn-out bag. But this time, instead of returning to the classroom, I walked straight toward the administration office. There, I picked up an application form for the social martial artist brand examination. Since Josie had forcefully stolen the guaranteed slot that should have allowed me to enter War College, then I would carve out another path to the top with my own hands. Since the school path had already been sealed off for me, I decided to choose another road instead. One far more dangerous, but also far more direct. The social martial artist grand examination. An exam with an extremely high death rate. The people who joined it were usually those without connections, without wealth, desperate people willing to gamble their lives for a future, or people who had already been cornered with nowhere else left to run. And I clearly belonged to the second group. I had just walked out of the administration office holding the application form when a smooth, mocking voice suddenly echoed through the hallway ahead of me. "Well, if it isn't our school's former genius, Lin An." The moment I looked up, I saw Josie walking toward me alongside several followers. One of his arms was casually wrapped around a female classmate wearing heavy makeup. Satisfaction and arrogance were written all over his face. He looked exactly like the kind of winner who stepped on others to climb higher, then laughed while looking down at the people beneath him. He stopped right in front of me and deliberately scanned me from head to toe before smirking. "You didn't come to school yesterday," he mocked. "What? Were you crying alone at home?" I couldn't even be bothered responding to him. I was about to walk past him when he suddenly grabbed my shoulder. Then his gaze lowered toward the application form in my hand. He snatched it away and looked at the words written on it. For a moment, he froze, then burst into loud laughter as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Social martial artist grand examination application form?" he shouted while holding up the paper for everyone to see. Look at this. A guy who awakened a trash 1 cubic meter storage space actually wants to join the social grand examination. He laughed so hard his shoulders shook. Are you tired of living already? Planning to walk into the wilderness? Just to become monster food? His voice was intentionally loud, and because of that, students quickly began gathering throughout the hallway. Some whispered among themselves, saying I had probably gone insane. Others shook their heads with pity, believing that someone like me joining the social martial artist exam was basically suicide, and many were simply there to enjoy the drama. They wanted to watch Josie crush me into the dirt and see whether I would lower my head and silently accept my fate again like always. In the eyes of these people, my years of patience and silence had long been mistaken for weakness. That was why every single one of them believed today would end exactly the same as before. But at the very moment everyone thought that, Josie casually threw my application form onto the floor. Then he raised his foot wearing limited edition tactical boots worth over 100,000 star coins and stomped down on it viciously. He kept grinding the paper beneath his foot while looking down at me from above, his voice filled with pure malice. Trash like you should stay where you belong, he sneered. This piece of paper is nothing more than your pathetic delusion. And crushing it is as easy as stepping on an ant. If this had been the old me, I probably would have just lowered my head, quietly picked up the paper, and swallowed all the humiliation in silence. But unfortunately for him, I wasn't the same person anymore. Slowly, I raised my head. There was no anger on my face, no tears of humiliation either, only a terrifying calmness. My dark eyes looked like bottomless abysses capable of swallowing all light itself. Then, in the very next second, without the slightest warning, boom! A deafening heavy impact exploded throughout the hallway. My body dipped slightly, and one of my legs transformed into a whip-like shadow almost too fast to see. My kick slammed directly into Josie's stomach with horrifying force. The attack was too fast, too heavy. The mocking smile on Josie's face hadn't even disappeared yet before his entire body looked like it had been struck by a speeding beast. His body bent like a shrimp as bitter acid and saliva exploded out of his mouth. Then both of his feet left the ground completely, and he flew backward over 30 meters. Bang! Crash! His back slammed violently into the hallway bulletin board, instantly shattering the entire glass panel into countless pieces. Broken shards scattered everywhere. The entire hallway fell silent. No one had expected this. No one had even imagined it. With a single kick, Josie had been blown away like garbage. His body slid down from the shattered board and collapsed onto the floor in a twisted mess. His face turned pale white, and the pain was so overwhelming he couldn't even scream properly. Meanwhile, I simply lowered my leg calmly and stood there in the exact same spot, as if the kick that had just sent a person flying wasn't anything special at all, like I had merely brushed away a little dust. But things didn't end there. From behind Josie's group, a silent middle-aged man with a buzz cut suddenly stepped forward. Veins bulged from his temples as a violent aura exploded out of his body, even cracking the floor tiles beneath his feet. A Class D power type awakened. This was the bodyguard personally assigned to Josie by the Joe family, a ruthless veteran who had once come straight from the military. He stared at me with cold, killing intent and slowly spoke. Kid, you've got a lot of courage. With a furious roar, the bodyguard charged forward like a fired cannon shell. His fist, as large as a pot, tore through the air with explosive force as it flew straight toward my face. The students around us instantly panicked. Shouts, gasps, and hurried footsteps echoed throughout the hallway because everyone knew that for a power type awakened at his level, shattering bones with a single punch wasn't an exaggeration at all. But I didn't retreat. Not only did I not retreat, at the exact moment his fist was about to smash into the bridge of my nose, I stepped forward instead. More precisely, I didn't directly clash against him. Like a drop of water slipping through a crack, my body moved in a strange flowing motion and entered his range. Less than 1 meter. The bodyguard froze for a split second, then grinned viciously. In his eyes, close combat was the absolute domain of power-type awakened users. So he instantly withdrew his punch and switched attacks. Both of his massive arms slammed inward together, planning to crush my body, bones, and organs into paste. Unfortunately for him, he didn't understand what 1 meter truly meant to me. To him, it was close-range combat. To me, it was absolute death. An invisible movement in space flickered silently. I didn't make any extra motion at all. Inside my mind, only a single command existed. Space, open, edge, cover the arm joints, space, close, crack. A horrifying snapping sound echoed through the hallway. Then every teacher and student present witnessed a scene they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The bodyguard's arms, less than an inch away from crushing me, were severed perfectly clean from both elbows. The detached forearms remained frozen in the same attack position for a brief moment before falling to the floor with 2 heavy thuds. The cuts were so smooth they looked polished like mirrors. First came a deafening silence. Then, almost as if delayed by half a second, blood erupted violently from the unbelievably smooth wounds, splattering across the hallway wall in massive fan-shaped streaks. The bodyguard slowly lowered his head and stared blankly at the empty space beneath his elbows. Then he looked toward the severed arms still twitching on the floor. The savage expression on his face froze completely, until the pain finally reached his brain in the next second. Then he screamed, a scream so horrifying it barely sounded human anymore. He collapsed to his knees and rolled across the ground like an animal being slaughtered alive. At that moment, the hallway became so silent that even the sound of a needle dropping could probably be heard. Everyone was completely stunned because nobody had seen what I did. They hadn't sensed the slightest fluctuation of energy either. The arms of a D-class power awakened user had simply vanished. And meanwhile, I calmly stepped over the bodyguard writhing in blood and slowly walked toward Josie. At this point, Josie was truly terrified. His face was pale as paper as he desperately crawled backward using both hands and feet. Before long, a dark, wet stain spread beneath him. He had actually pissed himself from fear. I walked directly in front of him and stopped. Then, under the stunned, terrified, and disbelieving gazes of hundreds of people, I slowly raised my old, worn-out shoe and firmly pressed it against Josie's swollen, trembling face. I forced his head down into the cold floor covered in shattered glass. Humiliation. A humiliation unlike anything he had ever experienced before in his life. I lowered my head slightly and looked at the face trembling beneath my foot. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a coldness like wind blowing from the North Pole, and everyone present heard it clearly. "That guaranteed slot of yours," I said calmly. "I don't care about it anymore." My eyes darkened further as I pressed harder against his face. "During the major exam, in front of everyone, I'll personally crush everything you're proud of." After saying those words, I slowly lifted my foot away from his face. Without sparing him another glance, I turned around and bent down to pick up the Grand Martial Arts Examination registration form from the floor before calmly dusting away the footprints and dirt covering it. Carrying my old bag while everyone instinctively moved aside to clear a path for me, I quietly walked away. Sunlight poured through the hallway windows, stretching my shadow long behind me. Alone, silent, yet carrying a pressure so heavy that nobody could even look at me directly anymore. Meanwhile, inside the principal's office, the old principal stared at the replay from the school CCTV with trembling hands. The video stopped at the exact moment I severed the bodyguard's arms. There was no obvious energy fluctuation, no violent aura burst. Even the distortion in space itself was so faint it was almost impossible to notice. And because of that, what happened became even more terrifying. Because it meant my power wasn't a simple attack ability. It directly interfered with the laws of reality themselves. The longer the old principal watched, the colder his entire body became. His hand lost its grip on the teacup he was holding, and it shattered onto the floor.
Follow, like, comment, and share for part 4.